Shagnon. Mr. Davis. Mr. Gould. Mr. Himmeline. Mr. Hemmer. Mr. Muldowney. Mr. Nazaro. Mr. Niebel. Mr. O'Connell. Mr. Odell. Mr. Pavlak. Mrs. Rankin.
This time, we're going to open the second privilege of the floor.
Hello, my name is Mark Twichell. I'm from Fredonia, and I'd like to thank the chairman and the members of the legislature. And I would like to read a brief petition that several of your constituents have signed. This petition is addressed to Senator Kevin Parker, who, as you know, is the chairman of the New York State Senate Energy Committee. And it starts out as, Dear Chair, Dear Honorable Senator Parker, as chair of the Senate Energy Committee, you may be familiar with the challenges our citizens and our municipalities statewide have faced in hosting industrial wind energy facilities. Many difficulties are due to New York State's clean energy standards' lack of corresponding legislative measures. As a mandate, the Clean Energy Standard was developed largely with the help of lobbyists whose industries may not represent the interests of all citizens or their environment. Although there is a mandate for the use of renewable energy, there is no verification. No verification of the objective of the mandate, which is to lower the use of fossil fuels in the generation and transmission of electricity. The Clean Energy Standard was also approved by legislative action without corresponding protective legislation. Those citizens in the direct path of renewable energy installations do not have adequate and necessary state-prescribed protections of their health, safety, and welfare. All New York State residents have concerns related to their support of the mandate through their taxes and electricity payments. Also, all New Yorkers deserve to know that their support of renewable energy provides measurable outcomes. Senator Parker, we are saying that New York State Clean Energy Standard does not contain necessary language specific and adequate to the accountability of the wind and solar industries for our continued unquestioned support in both dollars and public trust. Because renewable energy industries are not required to show that their integration with the power grid results in quantitative reductions in carbon dioxide emissions, consumers are unable to make informed decisions. This lack of verification also unfairly inhibits consideration of other low-carbon generating technologies. It is imperative that we act in possession of the most accurate information possible. We summarize our concerns as follows. Number one, there is no verification for the claims of renewable energy companies. Number two, there is inadequate protection from renewable energy's impacts on people and their health and their environment. Number three, as a mandate, the Clean Energy Standard is undemocratic and violates free market principles. And finally, Senator Parker, for the above reasons, we, the undersigned, petition you as chairperson of the New York State Senate Energy Committee to conduct a hearing which will lead to amendment of the language of the Clean Energy Standard to include verification such that all stakeholders understand how much CO2 is removed from our power grid as a result of each renewable energy project. We also request adoption of language specific to adequate protection for the health, safety, and welfare of citizens and their environment directly impacted by development of renewable energy. We anticipate your Energy Committee's provision of this important service. Signed, Mark Twichell, Michelle Twichell, Joni Riggle, Earl Riggle, Karen Engstrom, Tina Graziano, Angelo Graziano, and Judy Phillips. The importance of this petition, which will be shared with other municipalities and other wind opposition groups throughout New York State, is that it actually asks for two issues, and they both relate to this body. The first issue that we're addressing is the issue of protection. And you've all been gracious enough to hear our accounts of the disruption that the wind industry has prevailed upon our townships, and we brought that to your door. If the New York State would prescribe measures such as county oversight of projects, or let's talk about issues of noise and so forth. That would be very helpful, both to the citizens and their municipalities. The other request in this petition is that we're seeking verification. And this is for all of your constituents. Not every constituent that you represent lives in an impacted zone, but all of your constituents have a right to know whether they are actually getting the kind of support that they are paying for. They need support to know that the reductions for the threat of climate change are actually being achieved. And for those citizens, why would they not want to know? Why would they not want measurable outcomes in CO2 reduction? And thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone with second privilege on the floor?
Hi, Joni Riggle, Sinclairville. Thank you for this opportunity. The NYISO, the New York Grid Operators White Paper, warned the PSC and Governor Cuomo that the CES requiring 50% renewables by 2030 is unrealistic and not achievable due to, in part, to huge transmission constraints, that the plan needs to be tabled and reevaluated. Instead of taking heed, Kaufman, NYSERDA's, and Cuomo's energy czar gave NYISO a scathing rebuke. We now have Senator Kevin Parker, chair of New York State Energy Committee, who intends to direct state agencies to establish a plan to transition to 100% renewable energy in every sector of the economy and eliminate all human-caused emissions by 2050. I guess we all need to stop exhaling and burping. Currently, solar, wind, and biomass combined comprise just less than 5% of New York's energy mix. When the wind industry boasts emissions displaced by the wind energy, the figures are based on the project generating 24/7, 354 days a year at full nameplate capacity and with an inflated 36% capacity factor. Since this scenario is impossible, never happens, the results are grossly inaccurate and deceptive. NYISO states that the effective capacity, what we can actually use, is a mere 10%. Important to note, the continuous spinning reserve and ramping of natural gas to meet load and demand is never factored into the purported emissions that are displaced. NYISO's wind integration report states that deploying more wind will require more gas backup and ramping events, which emit more CO2, not less. The Ontario Society of Professional Engineers report that adding more wind and solar will double the CO2 emissions as nuclear gets phased out. Why don't our policymakers listen to these energy experts? I believe this is due to the huge undue influence by the wind industry and lobby groups like ACE New York. When you consider the fossil fuel used to manufacture turbines, transport them across the ocean and land, construct these wind projects, they incur a huge carbon debt. Is it ever paid back? Cement manufacturing alone is the second largest industrial source of CO2 emissions. Each turbine base, and they're growing larger all the time, require about 90 tons of cement. Each ton of cement releases 1.5 to 2 pounds of mercury. Per the EPA standards, cement kilns in the U.S. emit almost 23,000 pounds of mercury each year. This is not factored into their estimates either. Instead of continuing to build unreliable, inefficient, land-grabbing solar and wind projects, our tax dollars would be better spent developing highly efficient geothermal and fusion energy, R&D for viable renewables. For all these reasons, we would ask that you support our petition. We deserve unbiased and accurate measurements of avoided emissions and energy policies that do more good than harm. The Arkwright Wind Project and its suffering residents have given us a glimpse of what is in store for much of upstate New York. Future generations will just shake their heads and ask why. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone speak to the second privilege of the floor? Anyone? Thank you. Anyone to speak to the second privilege of the floor? Anyone to speak to the second privilege of the floor? Seeing none, we'll close the second privilege of the floor. Mr. Gould.
I'd like to adjourn at this time.
Thank you. Before we do, just a reminder, legislators, please stay around. We need to get a picture for the journal. Seconded by Mr. Bankowski. All those in favor signify by the usual sign.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you. See you next year.